I think there's a game of chicken being played because Hamas is assuming that if they just drag out the war a little bit more, Israel will eventually, given the disaster that's happening, given the internal and external pressures on it, will have to basically surrender to their conditions, which are that Israel agree to leave and end the war, leaving Hamas in power. Israel's assuming that if they prevent too many episodes like what allegedly has happened here, and this goes more or less smoothly, this situation will enable it to distribute aid without that aid getting to Hamas.
Right.
And Hamas, if it no longer is able to commandeer the aid and use it for patronage and use it to feed its own people and so forth in Gaza, then the pressure will be on Hamas, and Hamas will no longer be able to resist the kind of protests that we're hearing in Gaza now. It is critical, therefore, to understand that Hamas is going to try to prevent people from accessing the aid. And so when Israel suggests that it's Hamas people firing on Palestinians attempting to reach these areas, it might not be false. But I think Israel needs to understand that it's a state of emergency that people believe it might be the idea.
Right. Joining us now is Dalia Ziada. She's an Egyptian scholar and senior fellow at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. So, Dalia, are there any indications of how regional actors like Egypt and Qatar are responding to this new proposal?
Thank you for having me. Actually, what we're watching right now is a process of reinventing the wheel that was not able to operate or even move a step forward over the past 16 months. The same negotiations, the same points where all the parties are stuck at, and also the same mediators, Egypt and Qatar, who are not qualified at all, in my opinion, to moderate such a negotiation over ceasefire in Gaza due to their clear bias to Hamas situation.
It is up to, on one hand, the Gazans to keep up this movement, but also on the international community and international media to provide this much important coverage, literal coverage of these protests that will show the two main messages coming out of these Gazans. One, ending the war. Two, down with Hamas. This is what we've been seeing consistently throughout these protests.
All right, Dan, I'm interested to kind of hear your perspective on Egypt and Qatar and basically whether or not there's anybody out there at this point that has the ability to convince Hamas to agree to the current deal that's on the table without stalling with all these changes that it's now proposed.
It's very difficult to convince people if you're using the wrong tool. Direct pressure on Hamas doesn't seem to work, because they don't care about the damage to themselves and to the Gazan population. So my suspicion is that what hasn't worked for a year and a half and more will continue to not work. Egypt and Qatar basically should have completely delegitimized Hamas from the beginning. They should have caused the U.S. to pressure Israel to, from the beginning, create a day-after plan that will be very attractive to the Palestinians and to the Gazans, such that these protests would have happened a year and a half ago. It should be very clear to the Palestinians that they can continue to live and die in misery, or something very good might happen. Something really attractive such that 99% will want it. That level of pressure might convince Hamas because it'll create infighting within Hamas. And it would have happened much quicker had Israel not blocked the day after discussion for a year and a half in a manner that was perplexingly unstrategic. That Netanyahu should have allowed this to happen purely because of right-wing opposition in his coalition is just nuts. And yet here we are. Now remember, these people are incredibly brave. One protester in Gaza is worth 1,000 in the place that is not a jihadist dictatorship being bombed from the skies by Israel. If 100 people go there, go to these protests, to me that equals 100,000 people on the streets of Tel Aviv. They need to be assisted, but they need to be given the tools, and the tools are a day-after plan that will be compelling to every single rational person in Gaza, among the Palestinians, and in the Arab world.
All right, Dan, I'd like to thank you so much for joining us.